Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to speak on an issue which now more than ever needs immediate action if we wish our children and our grandchildren to have a healthy planet and healthy lives. Plus, rising carbon pollution is threatening our prosperity. I say pollution because that's what it is. It's a pollutant. If a pollutant is anything that has harmful effects when introduced into air or water, then greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide are pollutants if there ever were any. Instead of reducing this pollution, Environment Canada's own numbers show that we are on track to blow way past our 2020 emission target of a 20% reduction, releasing 734 megatonnes of greenhouse gas pollution in that year. That's a far cry from the government's own watered-down target of 612 megatonnes. Much of that increase will be from the oil and gas sector, which this government first promised to regulate in, wait for it, 2009. 4 environment ministers, and 5 years later, industry is still waiting for rules that will give us carbon reductions and certainty for energy companies. Today, science is telling us we only have a couple of years left to turn things around. The answer isn't complicated. Most agree that a polluter pay approach is the fairest and most effective way to lower emissions. You pollute, you pay. It's simple. Implementing it is simple too. You just put a price on carbon emissions, like many other countries are already doing. Putting an upstream fee on emissions as they come out of the ground will mean only a handful of sources need to be regulated and will avoid the need for a huge bureaucracy measuring emissions from every smokestack and tailpipe in Canada. Yes, this rising fee will mean carbon-intensive energy will cost more. And that's the entire point, Mr. Speaker. Because of this price signal, the market will use less and turn to less carbon-intensive alternatives. And conservatives claim to believe in market forces. Well, this is the most efficient, market-friendly way to reduce emissions. We can eliminate the impact on most families by making it completely revenue neutral, so that every dime collected from the fee is returned directly to Canadians to do whatever they choose. If they use less energy, they will actually make money. If they don't, they won't. It's up to them. The system is called fee and dividend, and I hope members will recognize it as a much better option instead of cap and trade or a carbon tax. I know what some will say, putting a price on carbon by any method is a carbon tax and that will kill jobs. No, fee and dividend will create new jobs. Let's not forget, under this definition, the government's own regulatory approach is a carbon tax. Let's admit up front that no party wants a policy that kills jobs, but do revenue-neutral policies to internalize the price of emissions cause economic harm? We have one of the world's best answers to that question right here in Canada. BC implemented a carbon tax and the sky did not fall. In contrast to taxes, under revenue-neutral fee and dividend, the government keeps none of the fee. Fee and dividend has the greatest potential to reduce emissions, be simpler, business-friendly, and will provide for the best incentive for all renewable energy alternatives price. That's why the Citizens Climate Lobby is pushing hard for it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of the Environment.
Mr. Speaker, our government takes the challenges of climate change seriously. For this reason, our government is implementing a sector-by-sector regulatory approach to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Our approach is achieving real reductions while providing regulatory certainty, driving innovation, and leveraging capital stock turnover to avoid locking in long-lived, high-emitting infrastructure. We are aligning certain sectoral policies with the United States, given the degree of economic integration between our two countries. This approach allows Canada to maximize progress on reducing emissions while maintaining economic competitiveness. We began implementing our approach by addressing 2 of the largest sources of greenhouse gas emissions in this country, the transportation and the electricity sectors. In the transportation sector, Mr. Speaker, we worked with the United States to put in place harmonized emission standards for new passenger automobiles and light trucks for up to the 2016 model year vehicles and issued proposed regulations for later model years. With these regulations, it is projected that the 2025 model year vehicles will produce 50% less greenhouse gas emissions than 2008 vehicles. We have taken the same approach to improving fuel efficiency and reducing greenhouse gas emissions from heavy-duty vehicles such as full-size pickups, semi-trucks, garbage trucks, and buses. As a result of these regulations, greenhouse gas emissions from 2018 model year heavy-duty vehicles will be reduced by up to 23%. In the electricity sector, our government coal-fired electricity regulations further strengthen Canada's position as a world leader in clean electricity production. We have introduced a tough new regulatory performance standard for coal-fired electricity generation. With these regulations, Canada became the first major coal user to ban the construction of traditional coal-fired electricity generation units. The fact is that no other government has done as much to reduce greenhouse gases than ours. As I mentioned, our approach is generating results, and Canadians can be proud of it. As a result of our actions, Mr. Speaker, Canada's 2020 emissions are projected to be about 128 megatonnes lower than what they would have been under the Liberals. This is equivalent, and it's important to note, of shutting down 37 coal-fired electricity generation plants. Mr. Speaker, our government will continue to focus on a pragmatic approach to climate change that will reduce emissions while continuing to create jobs and encourage the growth of Canada's economy. And we will achieve all of this without imposing a $20 billion carbon tax on Canadians as proposed by the opposition and the NDP. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Thunder Bay Superior North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, most MPs in this House on both sides of the aisle want to do what's best for Canada. We know that our job as MPs sometimes means making tough decisions we can't avoid any longer. Looking at the government's own numbers, every MP knows that we aren't doing enough, whether or not their party will allow them to admit that publicly. Each of us know that inaction on climate change will be far more expensive than taking action, so we must pick our poison. In Canada, so far the debate has been sadly polarized, like tonight, between cap and trade, which the U.S. is never likely to adopt, or a carbon tax, which political parties don't want to touch. Let's take the good advice of the Citizens Climate Lobby and support fee and dividend as the simplest, fairest, and most efficient way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and in a business-friendly way. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, the reality is since 2006, our government has taken action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and build a more sustainable environment through more than $10 billion in investments to support green infrastructure, energy efficiency, clean energy technologies, and the production of cleaner energy. We are seeing successes in greenhouse gas emissions have decreased while the economy has continued to grow. And Mr. Speaker, I think that's the first time that's ever happened. Canadians can also be proud of the fact that per capita emissions are at a historic low of 20.4 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent per person, their lowest level since tracking began in 1990. Mr. Speaker, we're committed to our approach and it's working, and Canadians can be sure that we will continue to oppose the NDP's $20 billion carbon tax. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.